Hi, I'm Professor Green. This is Chapter 9, and let's do Section 2. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Again, I really like this section. I like this whole course, right? But the idea is that we are looking at now which type of power, how we can use that power in a positive way, right? And so we start here with slide 19. Let me come back because I was reviewing them here. The power bases category. First, let's do the learning objectives for section 2. This is all about how to build bases of power, right? They give an example in the textbook of how there's one employee, he always comes to the meeting, he's always pitching his ideas, and they never get undertaken. And then he doesn't even get to pitch them after a while, right? So what's going on? So recognizing power bases that are used in organizations, know how people respond to different power bases, and identify tools you can do to develop and maintain your power bases. And again, I think that, very successful people really understand and know how to use these bases. So power bases category, they're categories into two different types that we'll go through. First, position power, which is like the formal authority in a hierarchical position or role. So you have a manager and you're the subordinate. But personal power, which, as I said, is becoming more and more popular because we have flatter organizations. This is individuals and generated through interpersonal relationships. And so we'll go into a deep dive as to what these are. And the first one here is just talking about position power. So the formal one. What is position power? Legitimate power, reward power, and coercive power. So the top two were good. The last one, not so good. Legitimate power, right? So you're the boss and you say, this has to get done. I'm the professor. I say, these are the learning outcomes. These are the homework assignments. This is what the final is going to look like, right? It's legit. So let's go ahead. There's a whole slide on it. Let's go through that. So it's reflected in an organizational structure, a hierarchy, right, org chart, and managerial span of control, as we spoke about, right? How many people does each manager have working underneath them? Reward power, right, is a little bit similar but different. It's the ability to provide rewards and incentives that have positive value. To remove poor, uncomfortable, or burdensome work conditions. And I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of value in these rewards sometimes. It may seem easy to use, but that's not always the case, right? Because you have constraints. And so examples of rewards that I wrote down are like meaningful jobs, I'm at the stage of my career where that's really what's important to me. Also, I don't get rewarded very much. I don't get an increase in salary very much for different types of projects that I take on. It's really up to me which projects I take on, and then so I'm only going to choose the meaningful ones. But some people are in charge of bonuses, etc. And this last bullet point, when rewards not match expectations are perceived as inequitable or not valued, right? Positive rewards are less effective. So again, understanding your employees and understanding what their values are. And, if Dale wants to reward me, she can give me cool projects, right? International projects is really my excitement at the moment, or has been for 20 years, but as I look at different things, right? I want things working with international students and international projects. I'm not necessarily interested in the LMU Faculty Senate, for example. She sent out an email about that. I've done that before, been there, done that. That's not necessarily a reward because you have to get elected and things that I was really interested in. Coercive power. So this is the use of threat or punishment. And you have to use this very carefully, right? The threat of being transferred, demoted, or fired. If one does not act as desired, it could also be withholding a pay raise or a bonus. Yikes. I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't think I've ever been in this role, thank goodness, with coercive power. Yeah, well, I mean, have there been projects where they say, like, if you don't want to go, then we don't have a role for you here? But I don't think that's ever really happened to me very often. If it's applied inappropriately for too long, it can negatively affect, right, morale and workplace culture. So it should not be relied on as a primary source of power, right? But it happens. I'm sure it's happened to me. I just can't think of an example at the moment. And so what are the responses to position power? So there's compliance, commitment, and resistance. There's a slide here for each of these. So compliance is all about, when the individuals accept another's influence. They say, okay, fine, I'll do it. They don't want to, but they do it. And unfortunately, this can yield a minimal effect. You're complying when you have to take a required class, even though you're not really interested. Hopefully that will change once you get into the class. But right, I remember when I had to take my religion requirements in undergrad, I didn't put as much effort into those as I could have. So it's purely instrumental, the compliance. It's done to obtain a specific reward or avoid a punishment, right? So, yeah, I don't want to talk about that too much because it sounds depressing, but it happens, right? And it has to happen sometimes in the workplace. Or my son, right? He has to clean up his room sometimes, right? Or he won't get a toy that he wants, or he won't get a play date or something like this. Sometimes we do that. Commitment, when individuals accept an influence out of duty or obligation. And so there are two different forms of commitment. First is identification, to accept an influence attempt because they want to maintain a positive relationship with a group or a person. And we see this in like fraternities and sororities. They'll say like, oh, well, I'm a part of this fraternity or the sorority. I don't necessarily want to do this, but I have committed to being a part of this organization. Or internalization, when individuals believe the desired behavior is congruent with their value system. And this is about the church, I have committed to going to church on Sundays because that's what the Catholics say is the right thing to do. Now we have resistance. So again, not always a bad thing, right? When people say no, make excuses, argue, there are two different strategies. What happens? First is the constructive resistance, right? This is thoughtful. This is more when people are more conscientious. And this happens more and more, right, with these flat organizations, because people, I feel, empowered to speak up. They maybe will take some time to make suggestions for alternative actions. They'll stall, and they'll wait, maybe. But then they can also be dysfunctional resistance, and this doesn't feel like very good. This is when they just ignore it or dismiss the request, so or thwart the idea. So this is not very proactive, right? So we want to make sure we're building a team where if there is resistance, then it's constructive. So the next slide talks about the responses of power here, where they conform, they either comply or they commit because they have a commitment, or they resist either constructively or dysfunctionally. What is personal power? So this is the one that I think is even the more interesting piece, or this is the one that I just feel has really helped me in my career. And I think that jobs in the future will rely so much on this because we're becoming more and more of our own boss, we're becoming more and more our own ally. And so here we talk about reputation, expertise, capability, and respect. It's available to anyone in the organization and not just those in formal positions, right? Or management roles. And so this is where I think that guy in the beginning of the chapter, where he was losing, that he needs to socialize a little bit more. He needs to go to happy hour with the crew. He needs to, get to know them personally so that they also get to know him and understand kind of what his intentions are, what his skill sets are, etc. So let's go through these and what it means when we talk about personal power and how you can enhance that. So expert personal power. Special skills and abilities, knowledge, job-related experience, your sound judgment, right? That is something that is expert. So expert is all about, what it is that you know. And, if you work for Salesforce, you need to have a Salesforce certification, or if you're going to go work for a partner of those. So again, actually job-related expertise. Reverent power. So this is the ability to influence others based on one's credibility, respect, and attractiveness, and often realized by those who have strong interpersonal and relationship skills. Again, I just think, taking an MBA, you're working a lot on your reverent power, you're networking, you're developing your personal and interpersonal and relationship skills. And so they just go really far, right? Emotional intelligence. And I think that I'm hoping that when you graduate from LMU, that you will have worked on this quite a bit. It can also come from an endorsement by someone who's highly respected or by association with a powerful, popular, or admirable group, right? For sure, right? You are the president of the student association. You are the vice president of your sorority, right? Then you have, power, knowing that people have elected you or people have kept you in office because they like you. Connection power. So yeah, I grew up in New York City, and we talked a lot about how there's a lot of power from, who you know, right? And we're going to talk about that in association power. Then we're going to talk about reciprocal alliances and information power again. So kind of circling back to expert power. So associate power is, it's not what you know, but who you know. And I think there's truth in this, right? And it's why I often connect my current students with my previous students or my previous colleagues in the workplace, because I think that by networking and talking to people and forming a relationship with people, they will then want to work with you or refer you to other jobs. And I just think this is a great way, because even when I go to hire people, I usually want to hire someone that I know personally, or that I know somebody knows them, right? Because it's you have more information about them, right? As opposed to just a 20 or 30-minute interview. So connections with key decision makers and individuals with access to valuable resources, right? Some people say at LMU that I'm famous for association power. Reciprocity power. This comes from reciprocal alliances with others, right? I'll do something for you if you do something for me. A good example is LMU donates a lot of money to the LAEDC, which is the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation. It's a nonprofit that helps bring together different organizations in Los Angeles from other countries. And we connect with the consulates, and we have this partnership of, we will provide, students to go study in Spain. They will help us with our visas. And then if a company comes to Los Angeles and they want to, showcase their products to universities, maybe we'll open up our doors and allow for an opportunity to get to know their product. So, and we do research projects for them. So there's a whole bunch of different overlap or reciprocity that we do with the LAEDC. And then information power, kind of circling back to this expert idea, is that, people have information that's valuable to others. It comes from access to data or insight of a position or in an organization, or for personal relationships. So again, you learn about, new technologies, the next greatest project, so that's coming around the bend, the merger acquisition that's about to happen, etc. So it can come from meetings, task forces, emails, policy documents, grapevine, right, hall talk, and then the opportunity to distribute that information. And so again, HR has a lot of information power, because they're usually one of the first to know when things are going to change internally. This happens all the time. And I think this is really an important place, important way to find this information is at important place to find that information is at social gatherings. Great. So thank you so much for joining me for part 2. I look forward to seeing you for part 3 of chapter 9.